A winter day enveloped the majestic castle, where a new story begins. In a spacious hall, a girl with pink hair introduces herself as Letizia Charlotte Esta. A young man with a cold gaze asks carefully about the reason for her visit. The girl, with determination, offers herself as an instrument to achieve his goal. She promises to become a shield that will help him avoid an unwanted wedding. At this moment, he meets her for the first time, and their destinies become intertwined. He was always called that, and that name became part of his destiny. The source of all the troubles was the Dowager Empress Astara, whose power was unquestioned. Letizia entered the palace, becoming his father's wife after the death of his previous wife, changing the course of family history. By the time he and his brother went for a walk, the shadows of intrigue were already gathering over them. Astara blamed him for the tragedy and banished him from the palace, leaving a bloody trail on the family tree. He found himself in the cold, without a single coin or support, exiled and forgotten. The hero is forced to go north, to the harsh and dangerous land of death. Having lost everyone who was dear to him, he was left alone with the endless silence. Years pass, and only she remains by his side. The silence becomes almost unbearable, as if it were pressing on the chest. One day, everything changes. A week earlier, at a lavish banquet in honor of the victory, something important happens. In the luxurious hall of the palace, he recalls trying to understand why he was prevented from entering. In a luxurious hall, a woman in a red dress with a cold smile is surprised by the attempt to announce her wedding without her consent. She admits that it hurts her to hear such words, standing opposite the man in the white uniform. The woman explains that she wanted to reward his services in the war by arranging an alliance with the young lady. The man abruptly stops her, accusing her of wanting to spy on him through Lady Ruzabek. He cancels the marriage proposal, and the woman smirks and questions his right to do as he pleases. The man confidently declares that he has already promised to marry another, causing indignation and anger in the woman. The man leaves the room with a firm step, forbidding anyone to ever use the word mother in his presence. There is not a drop of recognition in his soul, because he never considered her his mother. In the corridors of the palace, a servant anxiously asks if his master really has a bride, but he replies that it is a lie. The servant understands that such a lie will sooner or later be revealed, and finding a bride right away will not be easy. The prince, with a bitter smile, wonders who would want to marry the damned prince. It is at this moment that Letitia appears before him, as if fate were answering his doubts, and the question of the price she wants to receive for her consent to be used is heard in the majestic hall. The pink-haired girl asks only for a place to live for 6 months, promising to leave after 6 months. The prince reacts to her conditions with restraint, not hiding his surprise. Letitia accepts his answer with slight excitement, agreeing to the proposed conditions. In return, he demands that she not create any problems that he would have to solve. He warns that if she becomes a burden, their contract will immediately become null and void. Their relationship was nothing more than a contract, devoid of feelings and obligations. Letitia, as promised, lived peacefully in the castle, without disturbing the established order. The prince spent most of his time outside the castle, and their meetings were rare. Sometimes they would sit at the table together, sharing brief moments of formal communication. Sometimes they went for a walk in the garden, surrounded by flowers and silence. Their days merged into a monotonous routine, filled with repetitive events and tranquility. In the garden, among green trees and blue sky, he first thinks about changes in his life. His gaze fills with warmth as he realizes that the monotony of their days has turned out to be surprisingly beautiful. A desire arises in his heart to prolong this peaceful relationship longer than promised. He gently touches her hair, admitting to himself that he doesn't want to let Letitia go. In the library, a tense conversation ensues between them, filled with surprise and anxiety. He admits with a heavy voice that he suffers from an illness, hiding his true feelings behind it. A tense conversation ensues between them in the office when he learns of her illness and cannot hide his concern. She calmly explains that she didn't think it was necessary to tell, because after the end of the contract their paths would diverge. Letizia sadly recalls that he himself asked her not to cause trouble. The prince is desperately looking for a way to save her, not knowing how to cope with this test. At this moment, a servant bursts into the room, interrupting their conversation with important news. The prince is informed of the immediate imperial order to set out on campaign, and a look of alarm appears on his face. He hugs her tightly, promising to return as soon as possible. Before parting, he hopefully asks her to wait for his return. On a rainy night, she stays at the estate, fulfilling his request and waiting. Soon all that remained was a handful of ashes in a small urn. Holding the cold urn in his hands, he realizes that there is not a drop of warmth left in it. Remembering her, he realizes that he has become at least a little happier thanks to her. In the pouring rain, he walks alone towards the high tower, lost in his thoughts. His face and hair are wet from the rain, and in his soul he hears only Letitia's name. The guy thought about what it would be like if he could see her again. Suddenly he is called and looks up in surprise. His companions ask him with alarm what happened to him, noticing his confusion. He doesn't understand where he is or why his warriors are nearby, as if waking up from a long sleep. His companion reminds him of the upcoming victory banquet, and anxiety appears in the hero's eyes. He asks for details with surprise, and his interlocutor informs him that the Dowager Empress is going to announce his wedding at this celebration. The hero is shocked because the victory banquet has long since passed, and this does not fit into his memory. A strange smoke appears on his palm, causing him confusion and anxiety. A warning sounds in my head not to tell anyone about going back in time. He notices a wound on his hand with mysterious letters, not understanding their meaning. The guy is stunned to realize that he has actually returned to the past, and a storm of emotions rises in his soul. Remembering Letitia, he feels hope and determination fill his heart, preparing him for new challenges. He knows he must meet her first, and his gaze is directed forward, through the blue clouds of smoke. In the forest, he stops when someone calls out to him, and his face expresses slight surprise. The man turns to his companions, asking if they noticed anything in the sky, but they only exchange glances. He realizes that he is the only one who sees the mysterious blue smoke, and quickly waves it off, pretending that nothing happened. The hero realizes that he has returned in time to the moment before the victory banquet, when the Empress is about to announce his wedding to her puppet. One of the companions asks in surprise if the man with silver hair is really going to come to terms with the upcoming marriage. In response, hope appears because there is a way out of the current situation. The hero reasons that if she prevents him from entering the palace for the sake of a smooth wedding, he will have to appear there with a different face. His companion remembers the potion that allows him to change shape in emergency situations and confirms that he has it with him. A bottle with a mysterious potion appears in your hand, ready for use. The silver-haired man looks at the potion, contemplating his next step. Letitia, in an elegant dress, recalls her conversation with Kalian and her feelings in the carriage. The man checks his supplies, glad he has some painkillers in case he needs them. His companions are interested in whose guise he plans to use to enter the palace, as security is too strict. The hero decides that Winston Hilton would be the ideal choice for disguise. One of the companions remarks that Winston is a favorite of the Dowager Empress, which means he will be allowed into the palace without difficulty. The silver-haired man, without caring about the consequences, resolutely prepares for the upcoming mission. A black carriage drawn by 2 horses slowly moves along a forest road. On the carriage door there is a coat of arms depicting a bird, and inside there is an invitation to a banquet. The young man reflects with a satisfied smile on the fact that his efforts have finally borne fruit, since the Empress is clearly favorably disposed toward him. The sudden stop of the carriage causes him anxiety and bewilderment. He tries to understand with fear who could have interrupted his path. Inside the carriage he is quickly immobilized and tied up, giving him no opportunity to resist. Inside the carriage, 2 bound captives look fearfully at a cloaked figure who reproaches one of them for his loyalty to the Empress. A man with silver hair prepares to drink a potion to take on someone else's form. A magical liquid envelops his face, hiding his former features. His appearance changes completely, and he now looks like Winston. Outside the carriage, a group of cloaked men are ordered to wait for another carriage to arrive. One of the companions wonders why they need to wait for the Esta family's carriage. In the forest, a man in a cloak admits with a cold smile that their real goal is only just getting closer. His companion asks again in confusion, and then turns to his master with alarm. The luxurious carriage of the Esta family appears on the road, attracting the attention of everyone present. The carriage driver notices with concern that something is wrong ahead. One of the men in the raincoat inquires about the reason for the stop, and is told that the wheel is stuck in a ditch. The coachman realizes with annoyance that this is the only road to the palace, and now the path is blocked. Letitia sits in the carriage with her head down, and a magical light flickers around her. The coachman tries to contain his irritation, and the men in raincoats assure him that a solution will definitely be found. One of the strangers watches what is happening carefully, not taking his eyes off the carriage. An inner voice notes that Letitia is in this very carriage. The man in the cloak carefully touches the door, mentally addressing Letitia. Letitia breathes heavily, feeling anxious, and understands that danger is already near. The The young man in the cloak looks at the girl with concern, his heart beating faster with excitement. A girl in a light dress with trembling hands assures that she is fine, tightly clutching the bottle. She looks up surprised when a black-gloved hand reaches out to her, her face flushed and sweaty. Winston takes her hand gently, reminding her that she has already taken a sedative. He explains that this product leaves behind a special smell, and his words sound confident. The man carefully pours a painkiller into her palm, offering to take it instead of a sedative. Winston shows the girl the painkiller, assuring her that there is nothing suspicious in it. Letitia looks at the man doubtfully, not daring to take the medicine right away. She anxiously asks herself if it is really safe, feeling an inner uncertainty. Despite her doubts, the girl decides that she needs to take something now and prepares to take the pill. After taking the medicine, her gaze becomes surprised, and a feeling of coolness and light appears around her. The man asks her with a slight smile if she feels better, watching her reaction. A man in a cloak extends his hand, inviting a girl to get out of the carriage, and light flowers bloom around him. He carefully supports her hand, helping her take the first step onto the ground. Letitia suddenly loses her balance and screams in fright. The man catches her in his arms, and they are surrounded by a magical aura filled with roses and light. Winston looks at her with concern, trying to make sure that she is not hurt. The girl, with surprise and slight embarrassment, notes to herself that she has never met this man before. In the soft light, a man in a dark cloak looks anxiously at a girl with pink hair, and she, feeling his care, wonders why he is so worried about her. Letitia feels uneasy, realizing that even her own family shows no interest in her. She recalls how, more than 10 years ago, she was adopted by Countess Esta. The Countess's hand extended to her was the first warmth she had ever felt. This warmth turned out to be the last in her life. After the adoption is finalized, the carriage takes her through the forest on the way back. Suddenly, the horses become frightened and the driver loses control, resulting in a disaster. In the pouring rain, people with umbrellas gathered around the black coffin, saying goodbye to the departed. A girl in a morning dress stands to the side, her feet wet, while the others huddle together under umbrellas. She calls out for her father, realizing that she is the only survivor of the tragedy. The man with the cold gaze considers her a thorn in the family. The girl, surrounded by indifferent silhouettes, wonders if this was inevitable. In desperation, she knocks on the door, calling for her brother, hoping for a response. A girl with pink hair desperately knocks on the carriage door, overcome with fear and asking for help. She calls for her brother, but he only responds tiredly to her cries. Count Esta's eldest son, irritated, abruptly demands that the whining stop, losing his temper. The girl covers her ears with her hands and screams in fear, unable to contain her emotions. Isis Charlotte Esta, the eldest son of the Count, reproachfully asks why she cannot endure even a few minutes. He stands at the broken door of the carriage, indifferently noting that what happened was just an accident. The pink-haired girl, overcome with anxiety, understands that no words will bring her mother back. Her brother's cruel words make her feel unworthy of even the most basic necessities, and he wishes for her to experience the same pain as her mother. She remains alone in the dark carriage, immersed in the cold of loneliness. Memories are replaced by light, and someone addresses her with respect. Suddenly, a young man in a cloak appears in front of her, worriedly inquiring about her condition. Letitia, still shaking, insists she is fine as she stands next to the luxurious carriage. The pink-haired girl, looking down in embarrassment, admits that she has a hard time enduring carriage rides, while the man in the cloak attentively supports her. At the side of the road, two men discuss the impossibility of the carriage passing, and a girl watches them, waiting for a decision. She thinks anxiously that if she is late, she will incur Isis's wrath, and her face expresses concern. The man in the cloak suggests continuing the journey on horseback and riding together the rest of the way. His voice sounds confident and calm. The girl is worried that they might be seen together, and she feels slightly embarrassed. The man throws his cloak over her, and she looks at him with surprise and gratitude, feeling cared for. The young man looks confidently into Letitia's eyes, supporting her in a difficult moment. At night, guards stand at the illuminated gates of the palace, awaiting the arrival of guests. At the gate, a man helps a girl off her horse, and a guard asks to see an invitation. The guard is surprised to recognize the name on the invitation, realizing who is standing before him. After receiving confirmation, the guard greets the guests and allows them to enter. A man and a girl on a horse slowly ride into the palace, disappearing behind the golden gates. In a luxurious hall, the girl is surprised that her companion turns out to be the Marquis of Hilton, since they have never met before. The Marquis, with a slight smile, advises not to remember him in this form, and the girl, embarrassed, asks again. Suddenly, the girl starts to bleed from the nose and stands stunned. She presses her hand to her face in confusion, realizing that her nose is bleeding. The Marquis gently helps her, pressing a handkerchief to her nose and advising her not to tilt her head back. A slight sadness appears in his gaze. He remembers the past and calmly explains that you just need to press your nose until the bleeding stops. The pink-haired girl, embarrassed, thanks the young man for his kindness and wants to repay him for his help. The man asks if he can ask her for anything, and she agrees if it is within her power. His gaze becomes thoughtful, and he listens to her answer with interest. Letitia reacts to his words with surprise, not expecting such a thing. An elegant man with silver hair appears before her, whom she recognizes as the Archduke. She asks, confused, what he is doing here, and the Archduke calmly replies that he has his reasons. The man takes the girl by the hand and tells her that he has decided how she can repay him for his kindness. He asks her to become his wife with a slight smile, surrounding the confession with an atmosphere of solemnity. After the banquet, Letizia herself approaches him, and he is sure that she will not refuse if he proposes right now. Now all he has to do is keep her close and find a cure, although it won't be easy. The girl anxiously admits that she already has a fiancé. The man reacts to her confession with surprise and confusion, not expecting such an answer. Letizia, in an elegant dress, hands a handkerchief to a man, and a tense conversation about feelings and actions hangs between them. The pink-haired heroine freezes when she hears a familiar voice that evokes strong emotions in her. She appears at the door, admitting to herself her anger at having to meet in secret. In a dark room, a woman reproachfully asks a man named Patrick about his intentions to marry. Patrick denies the possibility of marriage with a cold smile. He disdainfully says that the adopted commoner is unworthy of him, and introduces himself as the second son of the ducal house of Godwin. The man, with a cold expression on his face, assures that he intends to use the girl only for a short time and then get rid of her. The pink-haired girl looks at the man with concern, wondering about his true intentions. The man with an icy gaze clarifies whether it is really her fiancé in front of him. He walks resolutely down the corridor, filled with anger and determination. The girl stops the man, grabbing his arm tightly. Letitia looks him in the eye and firmly declares that she will sort out the situation herself. A man takes a woman into the night hall, and she anxiously asks how he plans to get rid of another woman. He reminds his companion that their family is involved in the spice trade, hinting at his methods. A man with a mysterious smile talks about a recently discovered interesting spice. This plant is called tetrad and can bring a person to half-death without leaving a single trace. He coldly declares that if necessary, he will simply use the girl. The man disappears behind the curtain with the woman, assuring her that she has nothing to worry about if she is there. A man with a mysterious smile and a cloak warns Patrick to be careful. Tension is in the air. The blonde in the lace dress turns to Letitia, who suddenly appears next to her in amazement and alarm. A man with a glass in his hands awkwardly tries to explain himself to a girl with pink hair against the backdrop of the night sky. A look of shock appears on the man's face as liquid runs down it, and a trail of blood appears above his head. Letizia, with restraint and determination, proposes to break off the engagement, holding an overturned glass in her hand. The man, shocked and barely containing his emotions, realizes what has just happened. Letizia stands calmly on the balcony under the night sky, holding a glass. She explains to the man that a political marriage would give him their shipping business. The man with the wounded face realizes that all his efforts were in vain. The girl reports that she will soon submit a petition for divorce. The man grabs her hand abruptly, insisting that she listen to his answer. He looks her in the eyes and categorically states that there can be no talk of termination. A man looms over a girl on a balcony, confidently declaring that his refusal decides everything and urging her not to make a scene. He smirks and suggests that she pretend that there was no breakup or his secret intrigues, and he himself confirms both options. The girl looks at the sky with sadness, realizing that he really doesn't understand anything. The man squeezes her hand, his face and gestures full of tension and determination. The girl, holding a piece of jewelry with a green stone in her hand, understands that everything is going according to her plan, and the game is just beginning. A memory comes to her mind of someone showing her the same precious object and asking about its meaning. Letitia is surprised, and the man, burying his face in his hands, explains that the brooch is enchanted with recording magic for a huge amount of money. The man holds the brooch with a satisfied smile and thinks that with its help he can find his brother's weak spot and become a duke. The girl on the balcony looks thoughtfully at the brooch and wonders what will happen if the duke hears the recorded conversation. The man panics and demands the brooch be returned immediately, while a shocked blonde stands nearby. The girl clutches the brooch tightly in her hand, and a voice warns her not to do anything stupid. On the balcony, a girl threatens to accidentally drop a brooch right in front of the guards, while below, someone watches closely what is happening. The girl warns the man that if the illegal magical item in the palace becomes known, the situation could become very complicated. The man clenches his teeth in frustration, realizing the difficulty of the situation. The girl turns away and promises to return the brooch when the divorce is officially finalized. She understands that she also needs leverage over a man. The girl walks down the corridor, wondering why she put off this simple step for so long. She recalls that she had known about his mistress for a long time, so this did not come as a surprise to her. Letitia, clutching the brooch, enters the hall, thinking about her father and brother's reaction to the divorce. Her gaze reflects anxiety because she is sure that the family will not let this go without consequences. She is lost in thought, not knowing what to do next, when the door opens in front of her. A man with silver hair, surrounded by a glow, appears on the threshold and asks if everything went well. The girl bows her head in respect, addressing him as Archduke. She reminds the man of his request to become his bride, standing before him in the hall. Letizia, surrounded by radiance and flowers, looks at the silver-haired man with excitement, wondering about the meaning of his request to become his bride. A young man with silver hair contemplates the need for someone to temporarily act as his fiancé. Letitia is anxious about the fact that she needs to avoid an unwanted marriage. She wonders if the Archduke's life was anything like her own, standing before him in the luxurious hall. A glimmer of hope appears in her eyes if she becomes the Archduke's bride. Even her family will not be able to object to breaking off the engagement. She thinks that if she can gain freedom in this way, she is ready to take this step, and their hands join in a symbolic gesture. The girl confesses that she just broke off her engagement while standing face to face with the Archduke. Letitia, having gathered her courage, decides to accept the unexpected offer. The silver-haired man looks at her with relief and gratitude. He takes her hand and leads her along, announcing that the right moment has come. Their footsteps echo across the marble floor as they move forward together. The couple appears in the hall, where they are greeted by light and the attention of those around them. At this time, the guests highly appreciate the Archduke's merits in the recent victory, discussing his role at the reception. A young man with a serious face apologizes to the royal person, sensing the tension of the moment. From the balcony, the couple attracts the attention of guests, and the situation seems difficult for those present. A silver-haired man confidently declares his promise to marry the girl next to him. In the luxurious hall, the explanation is heard that the absence was due to the assumption that the guest would not appear at the banquet. In a cozy living room, the Duke, his bride, and their companion are engaged in a casual conversation, discussing the significance of the event. Letitia watches closely what is happening, reflecting on the new changes in her life. A piece of peach cake appears on the table in front of the girl, which immediately attracts her attention. She is alarmed to realize that she cannot try this dessert because of her allergy. The interlocutor asks with interest whether the marriage with Lady Este will really take place. The man confirms his intentions while carefully putting the cake aside. Instead of peach pie, he offers her another dessert, asking her to cancel her previous promise to marry another. The girl is surprised by his attention, amazed that he took care of her even in such a small thing. The woman reluctantly agrees to fulfill the request, acknowledging the length of time the promise was made. The cup trembles in her hand, and the internal tension becomes almost palpable. She indignantly accuses the Archduke of disrespecting the imperial decree. The man addresses those present, claiming that the Archduke's actions are merely a ruse. He asks if her anger is caused by the fact that the lady she has chosen will not become an archduchess. The woman, with a fake smile, replies that she doesn't understand what they're talking about. The man, with cold determination, reminds her that it is impossible to feign ignorance forever, and bows before his interlocutor. His gaze turns icy as he demands that no further conversation be held, addressing the Empress Dowager. The woman reacts to his words with anger, not hiding her indignation. The man quietly asks not to be disturbed anymore, stating that he does not intend to return to the capital. The Empress, unable to contain her emotions, reproachfully said that she had brought him to the capital in vain. She leaves the room quickly, declaring that she cannot stay there a minute longer, and the others watch her go. A man and a woman are about to leave the room, holding hands, their faces full of determination and slight anxiety. The interlocutor, with weariness and relief, wishes them a safe journey, placing his hand to his forehead. In a spacious hall, two men stand opposite each other, and one of them listens to the other with respect. The silver-haired man apologizes softly, his gaze becoming serious and thoughtful. The second man sadly admits that he cannot influence his mother's attitude, feeling his own powerlessness. The man in the black suit leaves, assuring that there is no need to worry, and finally leaves the room. In a luxurious hall, a dark-haired man says goodbye, hoping for a new meeting, while his interlocutor listens to these words with a cold expression on his face. The silver-haired man leaves, firmly declaring that such a meeting will not happen again. The man remaining in the hall looks after them, stunned and confused after the farewell. The silver-haired man quickly leaves the palace, mentally rushing to return to Letitia, realizing that he has wasted too much time. The news of the broken engagement suddenly catches up with him, causing him shock and indignation. At that moment, the pink-haired girl falls to the floor, barely containing her pain and emotions. The young man grabs the pink-haired girl by the shoulders, demanding to know if the rumors about her broken engagement with Patrick are true, and she restrainedly confirms this and asks to let her go. He angrily accuses her of recklessness, reminding her of their family's dealings with the Godwins and shifting responsibility for possible consequences onto her. The girl, sitting on the floor, feels the heaviness of what is happening and internal fatigue. Her head is buzzing from tension. Someone quickly climbs the stairs, mentally persuading the girl to call the broken engagement a mistake and to change her mind. A man with silver hair appears with a cold gaze and calmly asks to let go of his bride's hand. The young man, amazed and afraid, recognizes the Duke, his face distorted with surprise. Someone's hand suddenly grabs his wrist, the tension growing. The Duke, with a cold gaze, demands to be released, not hiding his superiority. The young man writhes in pain, his hand slipping from the grip. He, holding back his resentment, asks not to interfere in family affairs, considering the Duke's behavior excessive. The Duke, with icy calm, reminds them that he knows better than anyone about their family's situation. The young man indignantly accuses his interlocutor of ignorance about the betrayal of the girl's fiancé. Letitia looks at him in surprise, not understanding what he is talking about. In her thoughts, she reproaches herself for not being allowed to speak out, but out loud she assures that breaking off the engagement will not affect matters. The man abruptly grabs the girl by the hand, not hiding his irritation. He screams about how pathetic their family looked in this situation. The girl looks at what is happening with confusion and sadness, without resisting. Letitia, with pink hair, falls down, her name sounding in an anxious cry. Someone's hand manages to grab her wrist at the last moment. The Duke catches Letitia, preventing her from hitting the floor. The girl opens her eyes with difficulty, feeling pain and weakness. In the darkness, worried questions are heard, and Letitia loses her clear perception of what is happening. The Duke, bending over her, tries to understand how seriously she is injured. In the semi-darkness, the girl notices that the corridor has suddenly become dark. The Duke is surprised to find that the light has not gone out and wonders why everything seems different then. The girl panics and realizes that she can't see anything and is overcome with fear. The young man hurries down the stairs to make sure the Duke and Letizia are okay. He asks in bewilderment if she really fell because of a slight jerk. Letitia pulls away abruptly, not allowing herself to be touched. The man is angry and indignant that the girl dared to hit him, and she looks at him with a cold smile. The girl's hand drops sharply onto the table, and she begins to talk about a rare spice called tetra. The man clarifies that we are talking about a poison that can kill even in small doses, and asks with bewilderment what this means. His face is distorted with indignation. He considers what is happening madness, and does not understand how someone could underestimate their family. The girl, with a dark smile, wonders why her interlocutor became so angry, because she thought that he would be happy if someone else took care of her instead of him. The man tries to stop the conflict by calling for an end to family quarrels. A man with a cold expression says it's time to go back, and a girl with pink hair looks at him with concern. She asks him worriedly if he's okay, reminding him that he fell down the stairs while holding her in his arms. The girl winces in pain and suddenly screams, holding back her emotions. The man gently hugs her, advising her to take care of herself first, not him. The girl asks to be put on the ground, assuring him that she can walk on her own, but he insists that she remain in his arms because now she cannot walk alone. The man quietly reminds her that she can't see anything, and the girl looks at his face with alarm, realizing her helplessness. Late in the evening, at the gates of the mansion, the servants anxiously meet a man carrying a girl in his arms. One of the servants notices the master's dirty clothes with surprise and asks what happened inside. The blood on the man's hand frightens the servant, but he calmly reports his return to the city mansion. The servants inquire whether the lady will go with them and are ordered to prepare the horses. The man suddenly stops and briefly refuses something, not allowing the conversation to continue. The servant asks whether the carriage will be able to reach the city and receives the answer that it is possible if they do not go through the forest. The servant receives orders to immediately prepare the carriage, and his partner asks again in surprise. He is ordered to go to Count Est's estate to fetch the family doctor, and he bewilderedly objects that he will not be able to enter the mansion. In a panic, he catches the envelope flying towards him, screaming in fear. He finds a note in his hand saying that he is expected and will be able to meet with the doctor. The servant agrees to carry out the order, but asks to tell him later what happened. At this time, another servant reports that the carriage is ready, and the man and girl are preparing to leave. The carriage rushes along the dark road, hiding among the shadows of the night forest. Inside the carriage, Letitia, weakly holding onto her dress, suffers from pain while a man next to her prepares medicine. He addresses the girl by name, and she looks up weakly, barely holding on to consciousness. The man carefully asks if she can take the medicine, putting his arm around her shoulders. Letitia refuses with difficulty, her voice trembling with weakness. The man clutches the bottle of pills tightly in his hand, preparing to help her despite her resistance. The man carefully places a pill in his mouth, tilting his head slightly. He gently lifts the girl's face, asking her to wait a little. Their gazes meet in the semi-darkness. With tenderness and apology, he leans towards her, hugging and supporting her in this difficult moment. Letitia looks anxiously at the man, who asks her an important question about his identity. The man gently presses himself against Letitia, confessing that he is her husband. Outside the gates of the mansion, the silence of the night reigns, shrouded in a starry sky. In the room, Letitia lies on the bed, and a doctor examines her next to her, while a man watches from a chair. The man asks the doctor with concern about Letitia's condition. The doctor is confused and doesn't understand what's going on. A few days ago, the hero received a parcel from an unknown sender, which caused him anxiety and curiosity. Inside the package was a medical book he had never seen before, and thanks to it, he found a clue to the treatment of the lady's illness. The hero begins to suspect that the book was sent by the Archduke, and ponders this in silence. The doctor examines the lady lying on the bed and reports that there are no serious injuries other than a slight abrasion. The doctor assumes that the lady's condition is related to her illness and looks worried. He places his hand on his chest, expressing respect or relief after the examination. A letter appears on the table, which talks about a book sent to cure the disease. The man, with a serious face, admits that he had hoped for the doctor's insight in finding a treatment and is surprised by his knowledge of the disease. The doctor admits that he does not have the necessary knowledge, and he could not even determine the cause of the disease. A young man with a cold gaze asks how long the doctor has been serving the Esta family. The doctor replies that he has been working with the family for over 20 years and specifies that he treated Letitia after her accident. The doctor recalls how Letitia suffered a serious head injury and he treated her with magic stones. The doctor is alarmed to realize that his previous treatment may have caused the lady's current problems. The man confirms the guess, explaining that the magic of the stones met with a blood clot in the brain and caused a blockage. The doctor understands that even this information is enough to find treatment more quickly with his experience. The doctor justifies himself by saying that he only wanted to save the lady, and the man agrees that it was the best decision at the time. However, part of the responsibility for what happened still falls on the doctor. The man gives the doctor a year to find a way to save the lady. The man demands that the doctor find a cure within the allotted time, placing responsibility on him. Letitia lies in her room, bathed in soft light, recovering from her illness. She sits up in bed, wondering how long she had been unconscious and worrying that her brother might be angry if he found out. Letitia's imagination begins to worry, because if his lordship finds out about her condition, it will be a real disaster. Suddenly, she remembers the Duke, realizing the importance of his role in what is happening. Letitia looks at the man with alarm, realizing that he sees nothing and has no idea about her true condition. Letitia is surprised to notice that she is not in her room and carefully lowers her legs off the bed. She notices something at her feet, feeling slightly puzzled. Outside the door, two servants discuss whether they should enter or wait, fearing the consequences. One of the maids decides to knock, finding it strange that Letitia has been sleeping for so long, and at that moment the girl appears in front of them. The confused servants greet Letitia, one of them awkwardly slurring his words and the other calling him crazy. Letitia recognizes one of the servants as the same one she met in the forest, and he asks to call him simply Pell. Pell explains with a smile that they are in the Archduke's city mansion. Letitia is surprised to hear this and holds a notebook with a flower on the cover. Pell notices the notebook and asks why the young lady has it, and Letitia replies that she found it under the bed. Pell asks for the notebook to be returned so that he can give it to his master. Letitia declines with a smile, deciding to return the notebook in person. She clutches the notebook tightly to her chest, thinking that she needs to say something and that it would be better to meet in person. Letitia and the servants leave the room to go to the training yard, where, according to them, the person she needs is now located. A man with silver hair stands among blooming flowers, suddenly noticing the approach of guests. Letitia appears in the courtyard accompanied by a servant, her face lighting up with a slight smile. The man asks in surprise about the reason for her visit and inquires about her well-being, and Letitia sincerely expresses her gratitude. She admits that she wants to tell him something important. Letitia notices with alarm that his arm is bandaged and asks worriedly about the cause of the injury. Letitia asks worriedly if the man got hurt because of her, and he assures her that he is fine. The girl looks at his bandaged arm with anxiety and relief, worrying about his health. The servant notes with displeasure that he himself feels ill and will not be able to reach the room. The man takes Letitia's hand to support her. He looks at Letitia with surprise and concern when she asks him to help her walk, holding her hand. In a luxurious room, a man with silver hair leans on a table and turns his attention to a confused girl with long pink hair, inviting her to sit down. The man, clutching his chest, admits that the pain is so strong that it feels like he is dying, and a soft light illuminates his face. The girl looks at the man with anxiety and sympathy, at a loss for words. She comes closer and, full of determination, grabs him by the shirt, promising to help. The man, with a gentle smile, explains that her help is not caused by strange motives, since it was because of her that he suffered. Remembering the events, the girl mentally returns to what happened in the palace. The pink-haired girl, with a slight smile, admits that her interlocutor knew about her blindness. She remembers how she received help in the forest, despite the fact that she was a complete stranger to him. With sadness and respect, she turns to the man, calling him lordship. She looks into his eyes and asks him the reason why he asked her to play the role of the bride. The man replies that he saw the same expression in her eyes as in his own. He admits that he thought perhaps she found herself in a similar situation. Letitia looks at her with a slight smile. Her cheeks are slightly pink, and an atmosphere of tenderness and trust hangs in the air. The man with silver hair smiles, his gaze filled with calm and slight irony. The girl, allowing the man to touch her hair, calmly says that now she can be used too, since everything turned out this way. The man, adjusting his clothes, confirms with a smile that he can be much more useful than it seems, and the girl looks at him in surprise. The girl offers the man shelter instead of the count's estate, her face expressing determination and care. The man turns around with a slight smile as he leaves, and a soft light shines around him, as if emphasizing the importance of this moment. The pink-haired girl, looking down in embarrassment, says that help is no longer necessary. She blushes and hurries to justify herself by saying that she didn't intend to go that far, and the man watches her with a slight smile. The girl closes the door behind her with relief and a slight smile, feeling inner excitement. She, holding the door handle, asks the man to think about her proposal. The man, approaching, explains that if she becomes his wife, she will be able to escape from her old life. He remarks with a gentle smile that the north can also be a good place to live. Several days pass, and sunlight floods the facade of the majestic mansion. Letitia lies on the bed in a spacious, bright room, lost in her thoughts. She ponders the proposal, assuming that it is a sham marriage. A memory comes to mind of a time when she had already had to get married, and this causes anxiety. She thinks that if it happens with the Archduke, everything might be different. With a slight smile, the girl wonders if it's really that bad. An excited maid runs into the room with disturbing news. Letitia greets the maid with surprise, asking the reason for her anxiety. The maid, in a panic, reports that an archduke has appeared in the house. The girl is shocked by the unexpected news, and the maid hurries her to get dressed quickly. In the rush, ribbons and decorations fly around the room as the maid helps prepare. Already dressed, the girl listens with confusion as the maid confirms that the archduke has come specifically to her. The pink-haired girl calmly assures the maid that she can handle it herself and prepares to go out to meet the guest. She confidently leaves the room, heading towards the door, behind which they are already waiting for her. At the door, she is met by a man with silver hair, who greets her with restraint after a long separation. The man looks closely at the girl, noting the changes in her appearance. The girl, slightly embarrassed, admits that his visit was unexpected for her. She, embarrassed, notices that she is holding a ribbon in her hands, and the man watches her reaction with a smile. In the sunny living room, the man apologizes for the unexpected visit, explaining that he wanted to get an answer quickly. He sits down opposite the pink-haired girl and asks if she has considered the proposal of a sham marriage. The girl confirms with slight sadness that she had thought about it, but she hesitates to agree right away. She clasps her hands and admits that she is seriously ill and does not have long to live. The man listens attentively to her confession, waiting for her to continue. He says with a soft smile that he agrees to be near her, even if it is only for a short time. Letitia agrees to the terms, her voice calm and confident. She asks that their agreement be made official and put on paper. The girl clarifies that the contract should be automatically terminated after a year, and the man agrees with interest. The man, following her initiative, begins to fill out paperwork, thinking about her demands. The girl promises to keep secret everything that concerns the castle and her illness, sitting opposite the man at a long table. In the warm light of the fireplace, she asks if he would like anything else, and the man reflects on his true desires. Letitia gently asks not to call her interlocutor by his title, her gaze becoming warmer. The silver-haired man smiles back and asks to be addressed by his first name, creating a special trust between them. Letitia sits awkwardly across from a silver-haired man who insists on a condition for signing a contract. She, surrounded by flowers and light, tries to pronounce his name with excitement. The man looks at her with a slight smile when she finally calls him Callion. He contentedly allows himself to be addressed by name, and the pen begins to write a signature on the contract. After signing the contract, the man suggests going north. On the porch of the mansion, next to the carriage, he is surprised that the girl has packed so few things for the trip. Letitia confidently says that she took everything she needed with her, although her luggage looks modest. The man notices that her clothes are too modest, and she becomes a little embarrassed. She recalls the grim warning that nothing in this house truly belongs to her. The girl offers to carry her suitcase herself, but the man takes it in his hands. The man asks Letitia to look back, and she turns her head in surprise. A sad maid with eyes full of tears follows Letitia with her gaze. Letitia says goodbye to the tearful maid, explaining that the departure was unexpected. She thanks the maid for everything and assures her that she will have easier work ahead. The maid, touched by Letitia's words, can hardly hold back her tears. Letizia is surprised to notice the butler Philippe, who is holding several suitcases. The man with silver hair says that Philip will go with them. Letizia is surprised that even Philip is going with them. The silver-haired man, with a slight smile, confirms that the doctor will go with them because the girl needs him. Letitia anxiously wonders if her father has been informed of what is happening. The man, leaving, says that in time he will explain to his father that he is taking the doctor as part of her dowry. The girl looks after him in surprise, comprehending what she heard. The doctor climbs into the black carriage, preparing to leave. The girl stops, quietly saying the name Callion. A girl with pink hair and a man with silver eyes stand next to each other, and the air is filled with tension before they part. A magical light fills the space, creating a sense of wonder and change. The girl finds a first-class transfer scroll in her hands, intended only for members of the imperial family, and she is surprised by such a gift. The horse's servant asks him to go forward, promising to catch up soon and encouraging his companions. The girl and the man exchange glances that reflect slight anxiety and anticipation of a new path. In front of the closed doors of the mansion, the girl sadly realizes that she never felt this house was her own. In front of the shining portal, a man with silver hair walks forward confidently, and a girl with pink hair looks at him with a slight smile. Letitia extends her hand to meet the outstretched palm with surprise and trust. Their hands join in a tender touch amidst the glow and flowers. Letitia's eyes reflect surprise and awe when she hears the word home. A man with a warm smile promises her a new home filled with light and hope. Letitia happily and calmly agrees to go with him towards a new future. A young man with a tense expression on his face watches what is happening from behind the curtain. He is tormented by rumors about a broken engagement and the girl's new relationship with an influential man. He reflects with bewilderment on the fact that the Duke took someone like her under his protection. An image of a girl with a distorted smile, filled with bitterness and hidden reproach, emerges in his memory. The man presses his lips together, trying to suppress his emotions, but decides that none of it matters. He releases the curtain with relief, admitting that her departure left him with a sense of long-awaited release. The man, left in a semi-dark room, tries to convince himself that he feels relief. An indignant voice filled with reproach and bewilderment echoes over the glittering palace. The young man turns to his mother with cold calm, surprised by her anger. A woman with bright purple eyes and a stern face accuses her interlocutor of giving Kalyan the scroll. She throws the papers on the table in irritation, reminding him that she has forbidden him to give anything to this creature 1,000 times. The man, not paying any attention to her words, calmly replies that this is just one scroll of movement, but the mother warns that concessions will lead to even greater expectations. The woman angrily accuses her interlocutor of naivety, not believing that his actions were merely congratulations to his younger brother on his marriage. In the luxurious office, the name of Kalyan is heard, which is now most often discussed in high society, causing admiration among those who have seen him in person. The man discreetly reminds her that now is not the time to be idle, and the woman is surprised by his calm. He clenches his fist, insisting that action must be taken immediately before Kalyan gains more supporters and suspects new intrigue. The woman, with a sly smile, asks about the number of wells in the empire, hinting at her plans. Her eyes reflect a cold determination, for nothing spreads fear faster than water, and the man in military uniform asks a question with surprise and alarm, not understanding the reason for his interlocutor's interest. Istara, with a mysterious and insidious smile, enjoys the situation, her gaze full of hidden intentions. Istara confidently takes the initiative into her own hands, making it clear that she will deal with what is happening herself, and the man reacts with excitement. Istara approaches the man, her hand gently touching his face. The atmosphere becomes tense and ominous. Her fingers glide softly over his chin, creating a sense of control and power. Istara pulls her hand away, leaving behind a feeling of cold touch and internal tension. In a golden glow, the girl slowly opens her eyes, as if waking up from a long sleep. Her gaze becomes clearer, and the soft light of a winter morning spreads around her. She steps outside, her pink hair shimmering against the snowy landscape. A young man carefully covers the girl with a cloak, their gazes meeting against the backdrop of a winter forest. Letitia smiles, her eyes shine with joy. She enjoys the beauty of the world around her. Kalyan looks at her with relief and warmth, glad that she feels good in this place. Letitia walks through the snow, amazed at how much white there is around her, and a man watches her. Her heels leave neat marks on the snowy path, the snow crunching quietly under her feet. Kalyan looks at the girls with slight thoughtfulness, and she smiles, enjoying the moment. Guards stand at the castle gates, watching the action against the backdrop of a winter landscape. One of the guards looks at the approaching couple in surprise, not expecting to see such a picture. Kalyan carefully picks up Letitia and carries her across the bridge, surrounded by snow-covered trees. The guards are surprised to notice his lordship's return, but something unusual catches their attention. Kalyan carries Letitia in his arms, and she shyly asks to be put down, noticing the looks of those around her. Kalyan points out that if she goes barefoot, she risks getting frostbite, and insists on being called by his name. Letitia assures him that her feet won't freeze, but he doubts it and continues to care for her. Kalyan reflects that those around him would rather think that he loves his wife immensely. Letitia is embarrassed and cannot contain her slight indignation, her cheeks flush. He confidently walks forward, and those around him watch him and the girl in his arms with surprise and embarrassment. Letitia, embarrassed by the attention, muses that she could use a magic scroll to quickly travel to the castle. Kalyan explains that magic is limited within the castle walls, and the girl listens to his words in surprise. Together they look at the high tower rising above the castle and shrouded in radiance. Letitia asks in amazement about the tower, and the man watches her reaction closely. Kalyan confirms that the tower was built by Shuten's mages, and his gaze becomes serious. In a gloomy atmosphere, under the weight of fear and despair, people hide their faces, and faceless masks hover around them. The tower rises in the night, its dial glowing with a mysterious blue light, emphasizing the magical nature of this place. She realizes that the tower's magic makes it impossible to use the scrolls, and recalls how magic becomes distorted near powerful artifacts. Kalyan notes that the girl is well versed in magic as he carries her along a snowy road among old buildings. Together they look at the majestic tower covered with green vines, and the girl modestly confirms her knowledge. The clock tower stands out against the sky, its gold and black patterns emphasizing the importance of this magical structure. Against the backdrop of a tower clock, a promise to build a library for her is heard, and magical smoke swirls around the dial. The clock hands begin to move slowly, shrouded in a blue magical mist, as if time were awakening from a spell. In the rays of the sun, the majestic castle rises above the surrounding area, promising comfort and safety. Letizia, accompanied by her maid, enters the luxurious room, amazed by its beauty and grace. She looks around the interior with admiration, mentally noting how beautiful the room is. The girl smiles, thinking that even if she loses her sight, she will be able to easily move around this place. Letitia walks across the room, and the maid, visibly nervous, follows her. The maid stops and looks around anxiously, not knowing what to do next. Letitia reflects on the fact that those around her do not like her, but she has already become accustomed to this atmosphere. The maid, having gathered her courage, politely refuses further help and asks permission to leave. The maid takes one last look with slight trepidation before leaving the room. Letitia and the maid emerge from the luxurious hall, and the massive doors close behind them. Letitia, left alone in the spacious room, yawns, feeling slightly tired after a long day. The girl notices a luxurious bathroom, bathed in soft sunlight, and is amazed at its grandeur. She looks around the new space with interest, her gaze reflecting slight confusion. A large mirror surrounded by delicate flowers appears in the room, filling the atmosphere with comfort and tranquility. Letitia immerses herself in the warm water, allowing herself to relax and enjoy the pleasant warmth. She remembers something important, her thoughts become more focused, and a slight blush appears on her face. Letitia enjoys a warm bath, listening to the silence behind the closed door, feeling safe and at peace. She closes her eyes, immersed in her thoughts, remembering something important and dear to her heart. The girl decides to accept what is happening as a given, allowing herself to relax a little and let go of her worries. Suddenly, Letitia becomes alert when she hears something unusual, and a question arises in her mind. She turns around sharply, realizing that a familiar voice was heard behind the door, and surprise turns to alarm. Words are heard from behind the door that confirm her guess, and the atmosphere in the room fills with tense anticipation. Letitia comes out of the bath in a hurry, alarmed by the unexpected visit. Kalian appears in the doorway, his gaze serious, and he stops what is happening. At this time, the maid knocks on the door, worried about the situation inside the room. The butler notices Mia and asks what she is doing. The butler asks Mia in surprise why she is not accompanying her mistress. Mia, frightened and confused, anxiously holds the teapot, not knowing what to do next. The butler turns to the maid with concern, noticing her agitation as she awkwardly holds the teapot. The girl in the maid's uniform, trying to remain calm, leaves with a tray in her hands. Someone's hands are carefully writing something in a notebook against a background of delicate flowers. The butler, frowning and holding a book in his hands, says Mia's name with excitement. A woman with a mask and a stern look appears next to the butler, suspecting that he has done something wrong again. The butler angrily makes excuses to the masked woman, while the maid watches their conversation, holding a notepad. Mia writes notes in her notebook with interest and a slight smile, not paying attention to possible comments. She confidently lifts up the notebook, revealing pages filled with notes about what is happening. Masha, sighing tiredly, complains about Latam, and the butler looks at her with irritation. The butler explains with a serious expression that he serves his lordship in accordance with the promise he made. Masha is indignant, reminding him that she is his lordship's nanny and must accompany him. Mia, a little embarrassed, thinks that Masha felt uncomfortable around her, so she decided to move away. Masha reacts to what she hears with surprise and alarm, her face expressing confusion. Kalian, noticing something important, says Letitia's name with slight excitement. Letitia, in a warm bath, answers Kalian with a smile and embarrassment, her shoulders covered in drops of water. Letitia, still in the bath, tries to look friendly, reminding her interlocutor of urgent matters. Kalian, along with another young man, approaches the door, worriedly inquiring about what is happening. The door slams shut in front of the young man, leaving him confused and anxious. Kalian, standing at the door, calmly reports that everything is fine and lets his interlocutor go. The young man leaves with relief and slight excitement after hearing permission. Kalian clenches his fist, hiding the tension inside. He explains that he was unaware of anyone else being in the room. Letitia, looking out of the bathroom, is surprised how Kalian ended up in her private quarters. Kalian realizes that the husband and wife's rooms are connected through the bathroom, and it seems the servants did not explain this beforehand. Kalian notices that the water in Letitia's bath has cooled down and hands her a towel. Letitia, confused and surrounded by a pink light, remains in the water, not knowing what to do. Kalian, a little embarrassed, looks away, not knowing what to say. He advises Letitia to put on a robe and she quickly agrees and reaches for him. Letitia, still in the bath, calls out to Kalian in surprise, holding her robe in her hands. Kalian knows he should turn away so Letitia can get dressed in peace, and she's relieved to know it. Kalian quickly turns away, giving Letitia the opportunity to change her clothes, and the girl watches his actions with surprise. She throws a robe over her shoulders and carefully braids her hair, trying to come to her senses after the awkward situation. Letitia, already in her robe, announces with slight hesitation that she is going to return to her room. The guy, still standing with his back turned, wishes the girl a good rest without turning around. At this moment, Kalian remembers Letitia sitting in the water. He is suddenly overcome with embarrassment and reacts sharply to his thoughts. Kalian, covering his face with his hand, tries to cope with his excitement and convince himself that he has not lost his composure. Letitia sits on the edge of the bed in her room, her gaze thoughtfully lowered. The girl, still in thought, quietly asks if everything is okay with Kalian. She looks up in surprise, hearing something unexpected. Letitia walks out into the hallway and bumps into the guy, not knowing how to start a conversation. Kalian looks at her with slight confusion, his gaze softening. Kalian opens the door, and Letitia follows with slight surprise, listening to his words. The girl smiles. Her mood becomes noticeably lighter after hearing this. The guy looks at Letitia and asks why she hides her hair, because it is really beautiful. She is a little embarrassed, not expecting such a compliment. Letitia admits that she has difficulty drying her hair herself and asks Kalian for help. Kalian confirms that it is her he is asking for help, and the girl, surprised, asks if she was mistaken. Letitia gently helps Kalian by wrapping his head in a towel, and a special closeness develops between them. The girl, a little embarrassed, turns to the guy with another request. Letitia says with hope that she wants to learn to read Braille. Kalian, after some thought, agrees that it is indeed useful to learn this in advance. Men's footsteps sound down the corridor, heralding the continuation of the conversation. The guy confirms his consent, and another man appears nearby, watching what is happening. A young man with a scar on his face calmly informs that there is a librarian in the bookstore who knows Braille well. Kalian asks his interlocutor if this librarian is a man, and they both think about it. The boy with the scar is surprised that the librarian has already changed and apologizes for his mistake. He asks again in bewilderment, not understanding what happened. Kalian looks away, his gaze becoming thoughtful and a little distant. Outside the castle windows, winter silence reigns, snow-covered branches framing the majestic building. Letitia and Kalian walk down a luxurious palace corridor, surrounded by knight's armor and the light of a chandelier. Letitia and Kalian continue on their way, a slight awkwardness between them, but the atmosphere remains calm. Kalian explains with a smile that their path is determined by the order of my lord, and Letitia clarifies the details with interest. Letitia, walking on the carpet, asks Kalian about the future teacher who will teach her. Kalian is a little embarrassed, but confirms that he saw the teacher. Letitia smiles with relief when she hears that the teacher won't be strict with her. Kalian and the pink-haired girl stop in front of a massive door, behind which someone is already waiting for them. Letitia, despite the teacher's assurances of gentleness, is still nervous and hesitantly reaches for the door handle. She carefully opens the door, looking inside with a slight look of alarm on her face. The girl freezes in anticipation, warily peering at what is happening behind the door. Inside the room, Kalian, holding a book in his hands, calmly greets Letitia, making it clear that there is no danger. Letitia sheepishly explains her surprise, and the white-haired boy watches her with slight bewilderment. Letitia takes a sip of water to calm herself down a bit. The pink-haired girl sits at the table, and Kalian with white hair stands next to her, and she asks in surprise if the teacher has arrived yet. She notices with bewilderment that there is no one in the room except him. The boy with white hair turns to Letitia, his gaze becoming attentive. Letitia, in a funny and confused manner, suggests that perhaps he is her teacher. Kalian is surprised by her assumption, not hiding his confusion. Letitia, sitting on a chair opposite Kalian, shyly asks him to find another teacher for her, because he is too busy a man. The pink-haired girl is surprised that the training will proceed 1 word a day for a whole year. The white-haired guy calmly explains that due to his busy schedule, he won't be able to devote much time to her. Kalian begins to stretch his arms, a little awkwardly, while Letitia watches him with bewilderment. She, holding a book in her hands, suggests that she just let him read something on her own. Kalian declines with a slight smile, explaining that the book is too valuable to him to lend. Letitia reminds Kalian with surprise that he just refused, and the white-haired boy sheepishly makes an excuse. The pink-haired girl, a little confused, agrees to his terms. She hands Kalian an object, saying it is for him. The boy notices that it is Patrick's brooch and wonders why Letitia is giving it to him. Letitia explains that the brooch contains something important that might be useful to Kalian. At this moment, two men enter the room. Their faces are illuminated by light, and the atmosphere becomes solemn. Kalian listens attentively and asks Letitia to continue the story. The pink-haired girl explains that Peter manages all the affairs of the ducal family. A winter courtyard is visible outside the window, and the story continues about how Peter bought up many trading companies on the border with the north. Letitia holds the brooch in her hands, thinking that Patrick's weaknesses are written on it, and this could benefit the north. The white-haired guy wonders where she learned about trading companies and other details. Letitia calmly replies that she learned everything from the documents that the young duke looked through in her presence. Kalian is surprised how the girl was able to so accurately remember details she had seen only a couple of times. Letitia looks modest and a little shy, her gaze filled with softness. The boy with white hair and Letitia stand opposite each other. A special atmosphere of trust hangs between them. The girl with pink hair admits in confusion that she almost never went out in public. Letitia looks at the brooch in her hand in surprise, realizing its significance. Her face is reflected on the surface of the brooch, and Kalian notes that it was she who noticed what escaped his attention. Kalian, with a slight smile, asks if swords can bargain with words. The girl honestly answers that she doesn't know how, and the guy notes her sincerity. The white-haired boy looks at Letitia with approval, holding a brooch in his hand. Letitia, pressing her hand to her chest, admits to herself her uncertainty. She looks at Kalian with hope, and a warm and trusting moment arises between them. The pink-haired girl decides that she can cope if she helps Kalian. Letitia and Kalian stand side by side in a spacious hall, the girl tenderly holding the guy's arm, their figures filled with calm and trust. A boy with white hair leaned towards a girl. Together they studied an open book at a large table, the atmosphere filled with soft light. Letitia, slightly embarrassed, feels Kalian's gaze, who is watching her closely, supporting her at this moment. The hands of a girl and a boy touch on the page of a book, creating a feeling of closeness and support. Letitia's eyes reflect determination and slight excitement. She is completely immersed in what is happening. Outside the hall windows, the soft sunset light floods the room, filling the space with warmth and silence. Letitia follows Kalian down the hallway, wondering how attentive he is. The pink-haired girl stops, looking up thoughtfully. She looks out the window at the tower, bathed in sunset light, her hair shining in the rays of the sun. The clock on the tower suddenly starts ticking, which surprises Letitia. The girl remembers that the tower was previously broken and the hands did not move. The sound of bells ringing outside the window fills the room with a sense of change. Beyond the castle walls, the morning sky stretches out, the towers sparkling in the rays of light. Letitia stands in the room, slightly confused and thoughtful, her gaze full of expectation. A basket with a blanket and flowers appears at the richly decorated door, and everything around shines with a soft light. A girl with pink hair walks down the corridor, her steps echoing in the silence of the hall. She stops at the door and knocks hesitantly, hoping to be heard. Letitia carefully opens the door and sees Kalian talking to another man. Davis reports to Kalian about the completion of the task, and Letitia observes their conversation. The pink-haired girl looks at the scarred man in surprise when he addresses her. Kalian watches Davis' actions closely as he moves closer. Letitia and Davis discuss why he was in front of her room, and the atmosphere becomes tense. The man with the scar clarifies the details, his gaze becoming serious. The girl gently replies that it's all just nonsense, mentioning wildflowers and sweets. Kalian holds Letitia's hand, his gaze full of worry, and the girl looks at the guy with concern. He explains that he is a little cold due to his wet hair and the delay, and his face expresses slight discomfort. Davis reacts with surprise to Kalian's words, remembering his strength and past exploits. The man with the scar rushes to offer help, intending to call a doctor immediately. Davis looks confused, not knowing what to do in this situation. Kalian objects irritably, not wanting to draw undue attention to his condition. Davis quickly leaves the room, his face showing slight confusion and fatigue. The scarred man pauses at the door, thinking about how he's been getting kicked out too often lately. He looks away thoughtfully, trying to figure out if he is exaggerating his feelings. Davis peers cautiously around the corner, noticing an older man and a masked maid in the hall. Masha and Mia stand next to each other, and a stern man expresses his displeasure at them both. Maids look tense. The atmosphere becomes even more tense when the man demands that only one person be responsible for the matter, and Masha and Mia exchange confused glances. Davis is surprised to realize that these were the people who left the baskets at Letitia's door. The room is filled with silence, soft light, and anticipation. Kalian notices Letitia and watches her actions with interest. A girl with pink hair wraps herself in a large blanket, hoping to get warm. The white-haired guy notes with a slight smile that she is always capable of surprising. Kalian takes the blanket from the girl, reminding her that she shouldn't carry heavy things herself. Letitia stands before Kalian, who confidently gives orders to the servants. The pink-haired girl looks away thoughtfully, her thoughts occupied with the castle. Letitia looks confused, and the guy with white hair looks down as if he is thinking about something. Kalian turns around sharply, his face expressing internal protest. She admits with apprehension that she is afraid of causing inconvenience. The guy walks down a dark corridor where he is met by a man in a cloak. Kalian examines his bandaged wound, realizing that it has not yet healed. The guy with white hair turns away, and the man in the cloak decides with relief that he imagined it. The interlocutor reports that there has been no news since someone crossed the border. The man reflects that he might have to go there himself and return before the rain starts. Kalian stands by the window, lost in his thoughts. A man in a raincoat offers to go alone, warning of imminent rain. The man in the cloak looks forward determinedly when someone places a hand on his shoulder. Kalian looks with a slight smile, his gaze becoming softer. The white-haired boy steps forward, his movements full of determination. Kalian leaves the room, thinking about his actions, which are not typical for him. Letitia meets him in the hallway, explaining that she was heading to his office. The girl with pink hair hears that today's lesson will have to be postponed. She accepts the situation with a slight smile, realizing that nothing can be changed. The pink-haired girl wishes Kalian to be careful, her gaze full of concern. The guy with white hair stops as if remembering something. Letitia looks up in surprise, not fully understanding what is happening. Kalian covers his face with his hand, feeling confused and tired. In the darkness, two hands carefully pass a mysterious urn back and forth, and the atmosphere becomes tense. Kalian and Letitia stand opposite each other, their hands carefully intertwined in the shadows of the hall. In the darkness, someone is holding the mysterious urn tightly, as if protecting it. Someone's hand trembles as it is squeezed tightly, tension in the air. The guy's eyes reflect determination. He hears a promise to wait. Kalian asks again in surprise, not believing what he heard. Letitia confidently confirms her words, their hands joining in a tender and touching gesture. Kalian and Letitia stand facing each other, their gazes full of tenderness and hope, and the atmosphere around them is filled with the light of spring. The pink-haired girl looks at the boy in surprise, her eyes shining against the golden light. Kalian looks at Letitia with slight concern, his face expressing an internal struggle. The guy holds her hand tightly, not wanting to let go of this moment. Kalian apologizes, admitting that he couldn't contain his strength, and lets go of her hand. Letitia smiles softly as she says goodbye, and promises that they will definitely see each other later. Kalian stands with a slight smile, his gaze calm, but his eyes reflect hidden anxiety. Letitia sits alone in a chair, her figure seeming particularly fragile in the spacious room. The pink-haired girl places her hands on her knees, thinking about the guy's strange behavior. She remembers Kalian looking incredibly agitated and can't figure out why. Letitia looks out the window, watching the raindrops running down the glass. The girl decides that perhaps it's worth going somewhere, since she has no other things to do anyway. Letitia is sitting in a chair, looking thoughtfully ahead, when someone enters the room. Mia, a brown-haired maid, suddenly appears in the library, her face expressing mild surprise. The pink-haired girl reflects on how she's been seeing Mia more and more often lately, and isn't sure if her imagination is playing tricks on her. Mia, busy cleaning, suddenly becomes embarrassed when she notices someone looking at her. The maid with the dust feather looks confused and advises Letitia to wash her face. Mia leaves the room looking tired and a little upset. Letitia sits thoughtfully in her chair, wondering what to do next. She decides that maybe she should just read a book from the library. A girl with pink hair walks between the shelves, noticing how many different publications there are. Letitia is surprised to find that there are even children's editions among the books. She flips through one of the books with cute illustrations, noticing that they are all written by the same author and look new. The girl smiles as she thinks that she didn't expect Kalian to love such cute things. Letitia settles down with a book in a secluded corner of the library, hoping to remain unnoticed. It's raining outside, and the girl thinks that perhaps she'll be able to read a little. Outside in the pouring rain, a group of people and horses gather around a carriage. Someone kneels in the mud. A man in a raincoat remarks that the situation is not critical, but something has clearly happened. One of the companions wonders if they were delayed because of the troubles that befell the entire group. A man with a wound on his face turns to his companion, his gaze full of anxiety and determination. A man with a wound on his face raises his hand, his face remaining calm despite the rain. Kalyan, a boy with white hair, is breathing heavily and can hardly stand on his feet. Drops of rain are running down his skin. The forest is immersed in the sound of a downpour, water flooding everything around, creating a feeling of anxiety. The boy with the wound on his face leans over to Kalyan, trying to shelter him from the rain, concern visible in his gaze. Kalyan clutches the ornament around his neck, his lips trembling, and the rain continues. An ominous silhouette appears in the darkness, and an alarming thought rings in the mind that tomorrow may be too late. Kalyan's hand jerks away from the other's touch, the movement filled with determination. A boy with white hair walks away in the rain, and a man with a wound on his face looks after him, not hiding his anxiety. Kalyan stops, and the man with the wound on his face catches up with him, their argument continuing in the pouring rain. Kalyan squeezes the other's hand, his gaze cold and hard, tension in the air. A boy with white hair looks forward through the rain, his face expressing weariness and determination. Clouds are gathering over the castle. The rain does not stop, intensifying the atmosphere of impending disaster. In the hall by the stairs, the butler and two maids are discussing the latest events. The atmosphere is tense. The butler looks confused, and one of the maids covers her face with her hand, not hiding her excitement. Mia, the brown-haired maid, suddenly remembers something important, and her gaze becomes serious. The butler is alarmed to realize that someone might have gone outside, and his face expresses concern. The man turns around, his gaze full of anxiety and anticipation, tension in the air. Kalyan returns to the house, soaked in the rain, and his appearance surprises those around him. In the hall of the palace, a servant and a maid look anxiously at the person who entered, and the question about Letitia sounds in the air. Kalyan stands in the hall, his face serious, drops of water running down his cheeks. He listens intently. The white-haired boy reacts with surprise to what he hears, his gaze becoming wary. The butler grabs Kalyan's arm, trying to stop him, the tension between them growing. The sudden movement causes Kalyan's hand to hit the vase, causing it to fall. The vase shatters on the floor, the shards fly around the room, and a loud sound breaks the silence. Kalyan dodges, covering his head with his hand, his thoughts preoccupied with Letitia. The white-haired boy calls out to Letitia in desperation, his voice filled with worry. The pink-haired girl says Kalyana's name in surprise, her eyes full of excitement. Letitia appears in front of Kalyan. Her image seems to be illuminated by light, and the guy looks at her with relief. Kalyan breathes heavily, his face expressing fatigue and internal struggle. Letitia looks at Kalyan with concern, her voice shaking with worry for him. Letitia finds herself in Kalyan's arms. A soft atmosphere filled with light and petals surrounds them. The boy with white hair presses himself against the girl, his hand squeezing her shoulder. He seeks support in her. Kalyan finally allows himself to relax, a relieved smile crossing his face as Letitia holds him tightly. The pink-haired girl looks at Kalyan in surprise, not expecting such closeness, her eyes full of excitement. Letitia hugs the guy, supporting him, their figures merging in a single impulse. Blood appears on the floor among the shards of the vase, leaving an alarming mark next to the girl's leg. Kalyan, exhausted and touched, cuddles up to Letitia, his face expressing relief and fatigue. Letitia hugs the guy with surprise and care, her eyes full of tenderness and concern. The pink-haired girl holds Kalyan tightly, not wanting to let go, and there is a long-awaited warmth in her embrace. Letitia explains her disappearance. Her gaze softens, and the room becomes calm. The girl's arms gently embrace Kalyan, an atmosphere of comfort and support hovering between them. The head butler notices Letitia and Kalyan hugging and is drawn to the touching scene. The head maid and the butler watch the proceedings with alarm, their faces full of excitement. From above, we can see Kalyan and Letitia hugging in the middle of the hall, with the shards of a broken vase lying nearby. Letitia smiles, her face lights up with joy and relief, and the atmosphere becomes warmer. The butler and maid bow to show respect, their gestures emphasizing the importance of the moment. Masha, the masked maid, is surprised by Letitia's calm, noting her confidence and lack of embarrassment. The hall is filled with tranquility and soft light, creating a feeling of coziness and completeness. Kalyan lies in bed, and Letitia carefully covers him with a blanket. The room is dim and silent. The girl with pink hair is about to leave, but the guy weakly holds her hand, not wanting to let go. Kalian pulls Letitia towards him, hugging her, the desperation and need for support evident in his movements. Letitia looks at the guy in surprise, her eyes full of sympathy and tenderness. Kalian looks at the girl with anxiety and incomprehension, his gaze becoming serious and thoughtful. Letitia returns his gaze softly, and a quiet, confidential conversation begins between them. The rain is pounding outside the window, and Kalian and Letitia are sitting next to each other on the bed, their conversation filled with frankness and slight sadness. The pink-haired girl holds the guy's hand tightly, promising to stay by his side no matter what. Kalian looks at Letitia with hope, asking if she will still be there, tenderness hovering between them. In the silence of the night, there is a knock on the door, disturbing their private moment. Letitia and Kalian look warily towards the door, prepared for an unexpected visit. Someone's hand gently touches the door, heralding a new turn of events. Letitia walks down the castle corridor, her steps echoing in the silence, her thoughts occupied with the promised year. The pink-haired girl covers her mouth with her hand, her face showing concern and confusion. Blood appears on Letitia's palm. The wound reminds itself with unexpected pain. She talks calmly about frequent bleeding, her voice sounding quiet and tired. The room is dimly lit, with soft light and flowers creating an atmosphere of comfort and peace. Letitia, sitting on the bed, flinches from the knock on the door, her gaze directed towards the unexpected guest. Letitia looks ahead with surprise and a little anxiety, her eyes wide in anticipation. Kalian enters the room, his gaze landing on the pillow, and he wonders why it is there. The boy with white hair comes closer, holding a pillow in his hand, and the girl watches him from the bed. Kalian settles down on the sofa, expressing displeasure, and Letitia watches him with slight embarrassment. The guy lies down on his side, getting ready to sleep on the couch, and the girl with pink hair stands next to him, a little confused. Letitia looks at Kalian with surprise and thoughtfulness, her face illuminated by the soft light of the night. Medicine bottles are neatly arranged on the dressing table, reflecting concern for health. Kalian carefully treats the wound on his leg, leaving traces of blood on the bandage. The boy with white hair and Letitia sit next to each other, and there is a feeling of care and slight tension between them. Kalian smiles, and the pink-haired girl looks at him tenderly. The atmosphere becomes warmer. Letitia responds with a soft smile, her gaze filled with light and calm. Kalian turns away, thinking about the past, and the room becomes silent and slightly sad. Letitia looks at Kalian with a soft smile, her gaze full of understanding and sympathy. The girl shares her secret, talking about her fear of carriages and loss in childhood, her words filled with sincerity. She carefully closes the box, as if hiding her feelings and memories. Letitia asks Kalian not to get used to her, and a slight sadness and tension arises between them. The guy with white hair asks again in surprise, not understanding why she is talking about distance. The girl turns away, her long pink hair hiding her expression, and silence falls over the room. Letitia smiles through slight sadness, her gaze filled with tenderness and calm. The pink-haired girl rests her head on Kalian's shoulder, promising to leave only on a clear day, but there is uncertainty in her voice. She looks at the guy with a soft smile, admitting that she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Kalian watches Letitia thoughtfully, his eyes reflecting anxiety and a desire to protect her. The guy carefully takes the girl in his arms, laying her on the bed. Care and tenderness can be seen in every movement. Letitia falls asleep next to Kalian, her face illuminated by calm, and an atmosphere of comfort and trust hangs around her. Kalian looks at Letitia with a warm smile, his gaze filled with tenderness and calm. Letitia lowers her hand onto the sheet, feeling a slight excitement. The sound of rain can be heard outside the window. The white-haired boy leans towards the girl, an atmosphere of closeness and trust hovers between them. Kalian and Letitia lie next to each other, their eyes meeting as the room fills with soft light. The morning sun shines through the stained glass window, illuminating the room with golden rays. Letitia wakes up in a luxurious bedroom, her face reflecting the thoughtfulness and slight sadness of a new day. Letitia sits on the bed, her gaze calm and thoughtful. A pink-haired girl is alone in a luxurious bedroom, surrounded by silence and morning light. She smiles, glad that the rain quickly ended and the weather cleared up. Letitia carefully places her bare feet on the soft carpet, preparing to stand. The girl approaches the window, her long hair flows down her back, and the morning noise can be heard behind the glass. A carriage stops on the street in front of the mansion. New people have arrived from the capital. Letitia looks away with concern, worried about the situation around her. On the street, a guy is carrying a young girl on his back who looks very tired. The girl with pink hair is surprised by what is happening, not understanding what happened. The young stranger with purple hair looks scared and confused, holding tightly onto the guy's shoulders. Letitia approaches the window in confusion, trying to understand why Alan is here. She resolutely reaches for the door to leave the room and find out what is going on. Letitia suddenly bumps into Callian at the door, who looks at her seriously. The pink-haired girl is confused, feeling that the morning has started out unusually. The guy with white hair calmly explains that he was only waiting for the doctor. Letitia and Callian stand together when a servant approaches them with a report. Two servants announce their arrival with excitement, looking tense. In a spacious hall, a girl and a boy are waiting for an explanation, while the servants stand in front of them, embarrassed. The character rushes into the room in panic, his face and posture revealing anxiety and fear. The pink-haired girl and the white-haired boy greet him with caution. Letitia looks worried, and Callian remains calm. Callian tiredly covers his face with his hand, not believing what he heard and feeling irritated. The servant, standing next to the master, hesitantly reports the new circumstances. The guy anxiously asks if another problem has arisen, his voice trembling with excitement. Tension fills the room as it becomes clear that disturbing rumors are spreading in the capital. The servant runs out of the room in panic, promising to return with a report later. Letitia and Callian remain in the hall, watching the servant's hasty departure. The man with glasses is worried that if the young lady sees him like this, she will be very upset. The pink-haired girl looks at the girl who appeared in surprise, wondering what she is doing here. The man in glasses explains that this fearless girl snuck into the carriage. The purple-haired girl asks anxiously if the young lady is angry with her. Letitia advises to first focus on recovery and then return to the estate immediately. The pink-haired girl sadly admits that she has nowhere to go. The purple-haired child, looking upset, turns to Letitia. Letitia anxiously asks Callian if she can let the child stay. The girl, still in tears, hears that she is being asked to go upstairs. Callian, Letitia, and the man with glasses are watching the scene when someone appears in the doorway. Callian and Letitia stand next to each other when they are approached with important news. The man in glasses looks at the Duke and Letizia with concern, waiting for their reaction. Soft sunlight penetrates the room, filling it with tranquility. Letitia and Callian are sitting in the living room, listening to a story about the events in the capital. The guy reports that after their departure, an epidemic began, and everyone began to blame Callian for it. The pink-haired girl is outraged, not understanding what connection Callian could have with the outbreak. Callian nervously taps his fingers on the armrest of his chair, thinking about the rumors surrounding him. The white-haired boy ironically suggests that people consider him the cause of the god's wrath because of his return to the capital. The servant is confused and wonders how Callian knows about such conversations. Callian makes it clear with cold confidence that all of this is already obvious. At night, he releases a dove with a letter, entrusting an important message to the feathered messenger. Callian carefully reads the received letter, his gaze becoming serious and thoughtful. Callian reads a letter that warns him to be careful around the Empress Dowager. The white-haired boy turns away thoughtfully, considering the information he received. He moves his leg nervously, wondering what to do next. Callian and Letitia sit next to each other, both looking concerned about what is happening. The pink-haired girl is surprised that someone actually believes such ridiculous rumors. The guy explains that people tend to believe what they see with their own eyes, especially when it comes to illness. The man in glasses, a little nervously, asks permission to speak. Callian looks at his interlocutor carefully, allowing him to speak. A hand carefully takes a small glass vessel out of the suitcase. The man explains that what is happening is not an epidemic. Callian reports with cold determination that the water was tainted with poison. Letitia and the guy in uniform are shocked by the news that the water really is poisoned. A guy in uniform goes to the doctor in a panic, afraid that he drank poison and might now die. The doctor responds cautiously that this is only an assumption, and he cannot be completely sure. Callian, sitting on the sofa, clarifies what the doctor's opinion is based on. The man in glasses explains that now is not the season for the spread of the epidemic. The map shows the locations where outbreaks of the disease have appeared, and all of them are associated with wells. Callian doubts that their group could have also drunk contaminated water and become ill. Callian wonders thoughtfully what kind of poison was mixed into the water in order to understand the nature of the threat. The doctor explains that the substance is likely colorless and odorless, so it is not yet possible to determine its exact composition. The guy with white hair demands to know what antidote should be used in such a situation. The man in glasses panics and admits that he doesn't know the answer to this question. The doctor, overcome with despair, bows before Callian, begging for mercy or even death. The doctor, still shocked, sees no point in such a desperate request and cannot find a logical explanation for what is happening. He looks at Kalyan with concern, asking about the symptoms and the danger to life. The guy with white hair is calm. He is sure that all the machinations are aimed only at his reputation. Letitia with pink hair looks at Kalyan with concern, her eyes full of worry. Kalyan, keeping his cool, advises the girl to go back and rest. She, without hiding her excitement, notices that the guy looks unhealthy. Letitia walks away slowly, taking one last look at the seated Kalyan. Kalyan closes his eyes, lost in his thoughts. The guy thinks that if he leaves everything as is, the situation will calm down, but something else worries him. Letitia looks at him with concern and tenderness, her gaze filled with care. Kalyan instinctively squeezes the object in his hand, surprised by the girl's expression. He suddenly wonders if she really was worried about him. The guy with white hair refuses to believe it, internally denying his suspicions. Letitia stands next to the doctor, her face illuminated by a soft light, her thoughts filled with restraint. A girl with pink hair walks down the corridor with a doctor and an attendant, their footsteps echoing on the carpet. Pell, smiling slightly embarrassedly, turns to Letitia, inquiring about the reason for her appeal. She pauses, wondering thoughtfully if Kalyan always behaves like this. Pal clarifies what exactly Letitia means when she speaks of his lordship. The brown-haired boy admits that Kalyan doesn't even try to justify himself. Letitia wonders with dismay why Kalyan allows people to hate him for something he didn't do. The doctor stops next to the girl. Their conversation becomes more tense. Pell and Kalyan look indifferent, as if they don't pay attention to what's happening around them. The brown-haired boy explains with a smile that his lordship is indifferent by nature. Letitia calls out Pal's name, getting his attention. Pell begins to get nervous, feeling insecure under the girl's gaze. Pell looks at the scarred man in fear, feeling the tension growing. The brown-haired boy quickly comes up with an excuse to leave Letitia. Letitia and the man with the scar are left alone, and Pell quickly leaves the room. The man with the scar realizes that Pell has said too much and tries to hide his awkwardness. The pink-haired girl thoughtfully repeats the word sinner, her gaze becoming sad. The scarred man bows politely to Letitia, ending the conversation and stating that he has nothing more to say. Letitia slowly walks down the corridor, and the man with short hair watches her. Kalyan, weakened, lowers his head onto the pink-haired girl's shoulder, his face covered in sweat. The girl sighs heavily, admitting to herself that she can't stop thinking about what happened. Letitia addresses a doctor named Philip, her voice determined. The room is filled with golden light, reflecting off the luxurious furniture and walls. She asks Philip if he is sure that the substance in the well is a colorless, odorless poison. Letitia looks ahead with surprise and anxiety, waiting for an explanation. On the table are flasks with a reagent that was created during a fascination with toxicology. The doctor asks the girl whether she has tried this reagent on well water. She listens attentively as Philip explains that the reagent should detect most poisons. A silhouette appears in the semi-darkness, its footsteps sounding dull on the floor, creating a tense atmosphere. A man with long dark hair and an enigmatic smile appears in the frame, his presence causing alarm. Letitia's eyes reflect fear as she suddenly realizes something important. Philip wonders doubtfully if a completely new poison could appear out of nowhere. The girl with pink hair asks the doctor again, not believing her ears. She picks up a jar of reagent, preparing to test it. Letitia confidently suggests that the incident is connected to the Godwin family. The man in glasses anxiously clarifies whether they are talking about the ducal family of Godwins. The atmosphere in the room is tense. Letitia, holding a jar in her hand, tells how someone recently began secretly importing a certain spice. Against the backdrop of the sacks of goods, it is clear that the ducal family had no trouble obtaining import permits. The boy and girl stand next to each other, and he agrees with her guess, confirming her suspicions. The man understands that the situation may be much more serious than it initially seemed. Alan's example makes it clear that young children are particularly vulnerable, their lives at risk due to low tolerance. The doctor carefully places the flask with green liquid on the table, surprised by Letitia's knowledge. Letitia recalls seeing the information she needed in Patrick's documents one day while she was at the ducal estate. The doctor is amazed that the girl remembered the details after just one glance at the papers. He is about to add something but hesitates, considering it not so important. The blonde with the cold gaze claims that only Lady Appels of the Lorazin family has the necessary information. The doctor asks if this is the same Appels who was Patrick's lover, and Letitia confirms his guess. Letitia is surprised and tense, her gaze full of worry. On the throne, surrounded by radiance, rests a scepter with a blue stone, a symbol of power and mystery. The room is silent. Sunlight falls softly on the furniture and doors. Kalyan, his hand over his eyes, looks tired and thoughtful, the cigar in his hand underscoring the tension of the moment. A request for entry is heard from behind the massive door, and the atmosphere fills with anticipation. Kalyan recalls with displeasure that he asked not to be disturbed for a while. Kalyan suddenly lifts his head, alarmed by the unexpected noise. Letitia, along with the man at the door, tries to understand the source of the strange sound, but remains in the dark. She allows him to enter with a slight smile, preparing to share important news. The girl carefully opens the door, intending to talk to Kalyan. Letitia looks a little confused, her gaze full of expectation. Kalyan, sitting on the sofa, looks closely at the girl, waiting for an explanation. Letitia notices the smell of cigarettes, and Kalyan sheepishly admits that he forgot to air out the room. An ashtray full of cigarette butts is visible under the table, confirming recent smoking. Kalyan opens the window, letting in some fresh air and asking if it's any better. The girl stands in the center of the room, preparing to explain the reason for her visit. Letitia sadly says that one of her friends can't stand the smell. In the silence of the room, Kalyan wonders why she came, expecting an important conversation. Letitia and Kalyan are sitting on the couch, and the guy with white hair comes to the conclusion that Patrick is behind everything. The girl confirms his guess, her gaze becoming serious. Kalyan looks at Letitia carefully, trying to figure out if she knows anything else. A letter appears in the hands, warning to be careful with the Empress Dowager. Letitia notices that Kalyan already has his own suspicions about what is happening. She is sure that Patrick was helped by the imperial family, and this only confirms the danger of the situation. Letitia informs Kalyan of her decision to meet with Peter. Several days pass, and the events move to a snowy border region. An argument breaks out at the castle gates when one of the guests insists on meeting the Grand Duke. The guard explains that entry to the north is prohibited to outsiders without his lordship's permission. Peter, irritated by the situation, admits that all this is driving him crazy. His companion notices that they are getting too much attention, but the guy with black hair just smirks. A man with long black hair irritably remarks that the persistent rain has left everything wet. The red-haired guy recalls with displeasure that he had suggested leaving early, but everyone had decided to wait out the rain at the merchants. He and his companion look tired as they sit on the sofa, their fatigue clearly making itself felt. The dark-haired man with an enigmatic smile looks attentively at his interlocutor, and the red-haired guy is confused and with beads of sweat on his face, clearly nervous, not knowing how to react to the situation. A stone wall and a closed door in the background, a question is asked if there was any news from the father. The answer comes with regret. Neither letters nor messages via carrier pigeons have brought results. Two people stand next to each other. One of them suspects that something is wrong because there was no report. The guy with black hair stops, looking thoughtfully into the distance. The red-haired young man is surprised to report that Patrick has unexpectedly become a scribe at the imperial court. The black-haired girl smiles mysteriously, thinking that the Grand Duke, who had not been in touch for a long time, suddenly wanted to meet her. The guy with red hair looks at his companion with slight bewilderment. He smiles slyly, clearly anticipating how things will turn out. The red-haired guy thoughtfully recalls that he always pointed out the oddities. The man with black hair gently asks his companion to be quiet, placing his finger on his lips. The girl and the boy notice another person approaching, and the boy turns to him in surprise. The man with black hair calmly calls himself young Lord Godwin. The man with the scar on his face clarifies whether it is really Peter Godwin in front of him. The black-haired guy looks a little confused and tense, realizing the importance of the moment. The sunny and sophisticated living room has a calm atmosphere filled with soft light. Letitia recalls her meeting with the young Duke with surprise. Kalyan calmly confirms that she did indeed say that. The girl is lying on the bed, wrapped in a blanket, and is perplexed as to why she ended up in this position next to the guy. The white-haired guy, without looking up from his book, notes that this is retribution for lying, and the girl reacts indignantly. He gently touches her forehead, and she looks at him with slight surprise. Kalyan accuses Letitia of telling many lies, and the pink-haired girl hides her head under the blanket. The white-haired boy shows a bloody handkerchief, his gaze full of worry. Letitia is distraught when she realizes she has forgotten to remove the evidence of her illness. Kalyan holds up the handkerchief with the bloodstain, wondering if this really happens every night. The girl, wrapped in a blanket, hastily denies, trying to hide the truth. She sits up indignantly on the bed, considering what is happening to be too unfair. The white-haired boy addresses Letitia seriously, his gaze full of concern. The pink-haired girl, wrapped in a blanket, anxiously agrees and promises to understand his words. Kalian looks at her with slight relief, his expression softening. A boy and a girl walk along the corridor of the palace, their steps sounding in the silence of the luxurious hall. Letitia carefully asks if those who drank water from the well felt better. Kalian replies that everyone is recovering quickly, except for one person named Alan. Letitia listens carefully, taking in new information and reflecting on what is happening. In the pouring rain, people with raised hands express protest or despair in front of a stone building. Suddenly, a mysterious figure appears, its silhouette hidden in the darkness, and its smile seems sinister. A pink-haired girl and a white-haired boy, along with two maids, stand in front of the huge doors, preparing to enter. Letitia looks a little nervous as she stands next to Kalian, waiting to meet him. A man with black hair appears in the hall, his expression softening at the sight of the guests. The man with black hair looks with a slight smile. His gaze is calm and friendly. Light flowers are blooming around him. A girl with pink hair and a boy with white hair stand in a richly decorated room. A man with black hair bows before them, expressing respect. He greets the girl politely, reminding her of their previous meeting, and a friendly smile lights up his face. The guy with black hair watches what is happening carefully. A slight surprise appears in his eyes. Life comes back into the girl's eyes when she is away from Patrick. Her gaze becomes brighter and warmer. The guy with white hair does not take his eyes off Letitia all this time. His attention is completely focused on her. A girl with pink hair and a boy with white hair stand next to each other, a slight tension and anticipation hanging between them. She looks at the guy in surprise, and he seems a little confused, not knowing how to behave. The man with black hair watches them with a cheerful smile, mentally making fun of Patrick's absence. The guy's gaze becomes attentive, his eyes express wariness. The girl clutches an elegant brooch with a green stone in her hand. Her decoration attracts the attention of those around her. The man with black hair smiles thoughtfully, sensing something strange in what is happening. A man with black hair notices a brooch on his interlocutor's clothes. It seems familiar to him. He smiles, hiding his true thoughts behind a polite expression. The guy sits down opposite the girl and the guy with white hair, mentally noting that this brooch could be dangerous. The man carefully touches the brooch, deciding that he will use it if necessary. He bows his head, admitting that he would be ashamed of his guild's reputation if word of the goods reached the capital. The guy with black hair looks with slight sadness. His gaze becomes thoughtful and distant. The man with black hair reacts with surprise to his interlocutor's words. His posture is tense. The white-haired boy calmly explains his original intentions regarding the trade union. The pink-haired girl grips the guy's sleeve tightly, her gesture filled with emotion. The guy with white hair is perplexed, not understanding what is happening to the girl. Letitia confidently voices two demands, her voice sounding firm and decisive. The black-haired man agrees with a slight smile, noting that the North now interests him. In the spacious hall, the second demand, related to the current epidemic, is being discussed. The guy with white hair turns to the man with black hair, waiting for his reaction. The man with black hair reasons that a merchant will never agree to a losing deal. He assures that, on the contrary, it will bring benefits to the young master. The guy with black hair clarifies how this can help. The pink-haired girl explains that the product will be used to create an antidote, which will then be resold. Letitia announces her conditions with a joyful smile, her eyes shining with hope. The pink-haired girl confidently speaks of a counter-demand, her gaze full of determination. The man with black hair listens attentively, his face remaining serious and reserved. A slight, mysterious smile appears on his lips, hinting at hidden thoughts. Letitia hands over a box containing a rare plant, asking Philip about the time. Philip accepts the box in surprise, not believing that the girl actually managed to get this valuable ingredient. Philip holds a box with a rare plant, looking at Letitia and Kalian in surprise. The man with yellow hair promises to do everything possible to prepare the medicine as quickly as possible. The pink-haired girl watches his strange behavior with bewilderment. Letitia looks up, a slight worry in her eyes. A guy with white hair stands next to a girl. His face is serious, and she is looking at him carefully. Kalian speaks decisively about the need for an antidote, his gaze full of confidence. The man with black hair says with a smile that he must personally supervise the process of making the antidote. He looks at me with a slight smile, his well-groomed appearance causing mixed feelings in those around him. Kalian remembers that even in his past life this man was nearby. The white-haired boy and Letitia discuss how everything is too connected with the young Duke Godwin. The pink-haired girl is surprised by her feelings, her heart squeezed with excitement. She feels a heaviness in her chest, not understanding why the emotions are becoming so strong. The man looks at the girl with concern, noticing her uneasiness, and she, slightly embarrassed, admits that she feels an internal heaviness. The guy grabs the girl's hand tightly, not letting her leave. Kalian holds Letitia's hand with excitement, his gaze full of care and concern. Letitia, embarrassed, tries to explain to Kalian that the reason for her condition is not so important. She clasps her hands, convincing herself and those around her that this is all a trifle and not worth worrying about. Kalian doesn't believe her words, and is about to call a doctor immediately, but Letitia hurries to stop him, reminding him of the importance of preparing an antidote. Letitia grabs Kalian's hand. She assures him that she really does feel fine and does not have a fever. Letitia presses Kalian's palm to her face, her gaze full of determination. The girl confidently takes a step forward, demonstrating that her vision is fine. Kalian and Letitia look at each other, a tense atmosphere hanging between them. The boy and the girl find themselves very close, their gazes intertwined among the flowers. She is a little embarrassed, but the guy remains calm, thinking about his next steps. The pink-haired girl quickly leaves, remembering that someone should be in the office. She lowers her head, her hair flows softly over her shoulders, her mood becomes pensive. An empty corridor greets the girl as she approaches the right door. Letitia stops at the door, feeling a strange change in herself. She peers inside cautiously, her gaze full of concern. Inside the room, a man and a masked maid look at the girl in surprise, not expecting her to appear. Letitia enters a room where a butler and a masked maid stand at the bedside of a sick girl. The butler and the masked maid sheepishly make excuses, realizing the awkwardness of the situation. The girl thanks them for their care, noting that thanks to them the patient was not so lonely. Letitia admits that she thought these people didn't like her. The butler and the maid exclaim that this is not so, reacting with surprise to her words. The butler begins to explain that they avoided the girl for another reason. The masked maid recalls being considered disgusting, and burn marks are visible on her face. Letitia feels unwanted, and it weighs on her as the butler and maid watch her. The sick girl asks if Letitia thinks they are monstrous. The butler and the maid reply that they don't consider her that way at all. Letitia thanks them with a smile, noting that thanks to them, Alain feels better. The butler sheepishly admits that they have done nothing to deserve such praise. The girl stands by the bed, and the butler and the masked maid anxiously ask if she is still angry because of their rudeness. Letitia thinks of herself with a slight smile as someone who has only been here for a short time. The butler asks in surprise if it was she who left the basket at his door. The girl jokingly explains that she found out everything thanks to Sir Davis, although in fact it was just a guess. The maid decides to ask Letitia directly what she liked more, the strawberry scone or the lemon sorbet. Letitia looks at them with slight surprise, not expecting such a question. A slice of lemon pie is served on an elegant plate, garnished with a citrus wedge. Letitia smiles, her gaze filled with warmth and gratitude. The butler and the maid discuss the situation, realizing that what matters is not who is right, but mutual understanding. The pink-haired girl leaves the room, noting to herself that these people turned out to be much more energetic than she expected. She remembers that she hasn't seen Mia for a long time, and assumes that she has already gone to the office. Suddenly, someone with dark hair approaches Letitia's ear, disturbing her peace. Letitia stops in the hallway, listening warily to the surrounding sounds. A man with long, dark hair looks closely at the girl, wondering if she has lost anything. The guy watches her reaction with a smile, his gaze soft and friendly. The girl turns around in surprise, still holding her hand to her ear. He reminds Letitia that her room has been prepared in the West Wing and gestures in that direction. Letitia looks at her interlocutor with slight confusion, not expecting such a meeting. The red-haired boy and the maid meet the dark-haired man, who recognizes Mia. Letitia calls Mia to her, and the girl quickly approaches her. The girl explains that Mia is shy around strangers and promises to find another guide. The dark-haired man invites Letitia to show him the way. He admits with a smile that he is also a little shy, but there is a special connection between them. Letitia wonders if this will be difficult for him, and Mia looks worried. Letitia, Peter, the maid, and the red-haired guy walk down the corridor in a chain. The pink-haired girl looks up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Letitia remembers her promise to Kalian, feeling an inner turmoil. Peter stops at the window and looks at the tall clock tower, watching it thoughtfully. Letitia draws attention with interest to the legend associated with this tower. Peter smiles, reminding that any wish made at the tower will come true if you pay the right price. Peter approaches Letitia and quietly speaks words about the price that must be paid for the wish. The pink-haired girl's eyes reflect the thought of her own desire. Letitia notices that the time on the tower has changed again, which makes her doubtful. In the corridor, it is discussed that the Earl and young Lord Esta must be in great agitation, and the question is asked whether the family knows about Patrick's affair. Letitia clarifies whether the young Lord Esta is indeed aware of what is happening by taking a step forward. She reflects that, knowing Patrick's character, he should have died already. Peter and Letitia stop at the end of a long corridor, and the guy with red hair lingers behind. Peter notes that the route was shorter than he expected and is about to go inside. In the dimly lit room, a remark is made that Letitia has changed a lot since she was in the capital and now looks much better. Letitia takes this as a compliment with a slight smile, and the maid stands next to her. Peter says goodbye, still smiling, and leaves. Several days pass, and a calm morning rises over the castle again. Letitia sits by the lilac-haired girl's bed, listening to her attentively. The girl with lilac hair happily reports that she feels much better and will soon be able to return to normal life. Letitia smiles with relief, happy about the good news. 3 men gather in the corridor, among whom Kalyan with white hair stands out. Letitia approaches the men, and one of them inquires about the condition of a girl named Alain. Letitia confirms that Alain has shown significant improvement and notes the effectiveness of the antidote. Peter smiles and offers to begin signing the contract, and the man in glasses breathes a sigh of relief. The guy with glasses says it will take about 5 days, but mentions a problem that has arisen. There is a rare plant on the table, and it becomes clear that there is not enough tetrad to produce the required amount of antidote. Peter clarifies that more tetrads need to be found to resolve the current situation. Kalyan with white hair asks what exactly the problem is. The black-haired man notes that most of the supplies have gone into the wells, and the remaining amount may not be enough to meet the needs of the capital. He closes his eyes, thinking that if people start dying during this time, the situation will become critical. The man adjusts his hair, and a blond man with glasses stands next to him, watching him with concern. The guy collects his thoughts, touching his forehead and trying to find a way out of the current situation. He remembers that there is another family in the Empire that has a tetrad. Kalyan and Letitia stand together, and the boy remembers that there is another family in the Empire that has a notebook. The man raises a finger, clarifying that the House of Esta is responsible for transporting these spices. Kalyan doubts that the Duke will agree to share such a rare and valuable spice. Outside the gate, a man explains that they have had some bad luck this year and were unable to pay for the shipment on time. As an exception, they paid with some expensive spices, among which was probably tetrad. The company discusses that since the desired family belongs to their circle, making a request will not be difficult. The guy with white hair looks serious, offering to go to the Count himself with a request. The man with black hair says with a smile that the Count has set a certain condition. The guy with black hair turns to Letitia with a smile, hinting at her participation. Kalyan and Letitia are surprised when it becomes clear that someone else is supposed to go. The girl with pink hair looks confused and a little scared, realizing what is happening. A flicker of anxiety flashes through her thoughts. Will she really be the one to go? Sunlight illuminates the majestic building, as if heralding change. The guy, blushing and hanging his head, suddenly sneezes, his shoulders shaking from this sudden movement. The guy scratches his head thoughtfully, wondering how much longer they will have to store all this junk. Bags of things irritate him because they are nothing but trouble, difficult to store, and take up a lot of space. He wonders why his ears itch so much and starts rubbing them. The guy suspects that someone is talking about him behind his back and looks around warily. A man with long blonde hair stands at the massive door, as if about to go inside. The room has a bright and luxurious atmosphere, filled with morning sunshine. On the table in the sunny room lie several gold coins, sparkling in the rays of light. A note is found nearby, which states that the amount taken to the north was left on the table. The man with yellow hair looks at him with irritation, considering what is happening to be insolence. A boy with brown hair cautiously peers into the room, observing the situation. In the spacious hall, a man with yellow hair reproaches his interlocutor for his constant visits to Letitia's room, reminding him that this only spoils the mood. He turns to explain his point, not hiding his displeasure. The brown-haired guy, with his arms spread behind his head, indignantly thinks about how Letitia could get married and not send a single letter. A stern voice comes from behind the closed door, interrupting his flow of thoughts. The man watches his interlocutor leaving with tension, feeling inner unrest. He remains in place, thoughtfully lowering his hands and trying to cope with his emotions. Footsteps echo across the marble floor as 2 men walk down the hallway. One of them stops, suspecting that someone close to him has contracted the disease. The man with yellow hair turns to look at the boy with dark hair, and there is tension between them. He frowns, thinking about how unusually quiet the house has become since the engagement broke off. The dark-haired boy carefully expresses his opinion, disagreeing with his father. He explains that the problem is not the silence about the engagement, but the inability to say anything. The man with yellow hair reacts with surprise, suspecting intrigue. The dark-haired boy speaks with alarm about his meeting with Lady Apple of the House of Lorazan, considering it madness. The man clenches his fist, unable to contain his anger at the other person's actions. The dark-haired guy is surprised, trying to figure out if everything is known. In his imagination, the guy flares up with indignation, but quickly returns to calm. The man with yellow hair is outraged, believing that they are not respected at all. In the bright hall, an explanation is heard that her father usually does not listen when it comes to her, and attempts to talk have been unsuccessful. The man asks what Letitia said, and the guy looks worried. The man with yellow hair raises his hand to his face thoughtfully, considering someone too soft. He announces that he must visit Duke Godwin, and his steps sound confident. The man adjusts his sleeve, emphasizing that he has a good reason for the visit, and there is no need to compare yourself to him. The dark-haired guy asks in surprise what we are talking about. The man holds up an envelope, explaining that it contains goods and receipts from the Godwin house that have just arrived. He reasons with a slight smile that if any difficulties arise, he will threaten to throw it all into the sea, and then the Duke will have no choice but to let them in. A majestic castle rises against the blue sky, surrounded by bare tree branches. Letitia, with pink hair, looks excited, her eyes full of anxiety and anticipation. Two servants inform the girl and her companion that they consider it advisable to meet with the Count. Kalian is outraged, considering the proposal absurd and doubting that everyone will easily agree to the deal. The man with long dark hair smiles, assuring that the father will not refuse to help his own daughter. Letitia calmly declares that they will only buy the notebook from this house. Kalian turns to Philip, and the man with glasses looks a little confused. Philip is excitedly thinking about what he can cook right now. Kalian, standing next to Letitia, confidently says that this is enough. The guy with white hair gently explains that the girl doesn't need to do that. Letitia looks at Kalian in surprise, not expecting such an answer. Kalian indignantly asks why they should depend on another person in this matter. Letitia looks on with a soft smile despite her inner doubts. Kalian wonders if the girl is too kind or naive, since all this is happening because of some simple antidote. The girl reaches out to the guy's sleeve as if trying to stop him. Letitia and Kalian stand next to each other, and the girl is ready to explain her position. She confidently speaks of passing the antidote to the Count's family through the young lord, but she understands that this is not enough. Kalian emphasizes that this is her personal matter and has nothing to do with anyone else. Kalian turns around, asking Letitia not to interfere with what is happening. The guy with white hair assures the girl that he will sort out his affairs himself. Letitia looks at him with confusion and slight offense. The girl lowers her head, holding back her emotions. She clutches the dress in her hands, trying to cope with the internal tension. Peter looks at Letitia and Kalian in surprise, not understanding what is happening between them. Kalian reaches out to Letitia, trying to stop her, but she walks away. His hand remains in the air, not reaching her curl. Letitia, holding back her emotions, explains that she did not have time to study the information received. The girl quickly turns around and leaves the room, leaving Kalian confused. Kalian looks after her with concern and regret. Peter and Philip watch what is happening, not hiding their surprise and slight concern. Peter smiles reservedly, trying to hide his slight nervousness. A man with black hair stands next to Kalian. Both of them look a little tense but try to remain calm. Kalian looks confused. His face shows confusion and slight anxiety. The guy with white hair tries to explain, and Peter looks at him in surprise, not fully understanding the situation. Kalian insists that there is no quarrel between them, his gaze becoming more serious. Peter looks puzzled and a little confused, as if he doesn't understand what's going on. Kalian looks at Peter with irritation, and Peter is confused and slightly tense. There is a misunderstanding between them. Peter tries to hide his smile, pretending that he is not amused by what is happening, but Kalian notices this. Peter pulls at his cheeks in confusion, while Kalian and another man watch him with surprise and slight irritation. Kalian covers his face with his hand wearily, making a decision about the situation with the antidote and forbidding discussion of certain topics. Peter reluctantly agrees, accepting Kalian's terms and trying to look serious. In the empty corridor, a reminder sounds that the Duchess looked very upset, and someone wonders whether they should follow her. Kalian covers his face with his hand, hurt by the words about everyone turning away from the Duchess. Peter turns to Kalyan with a slight smile, while another man stands nearby, watching their conversation. Kalyan thinks to himself, realizing that the Duchess was truly worried about him. One of the men stops, visibly nervous, and asks what is going on. Peter exclaims sharply, his face and posture expressing surprise and alarm. Kalyan, looking at Peter, says that now that the antidote is ready, there is no need for his further presence. Peter asks Kalyan in a reserved manner if his presence makes him uncomfortable, and Kalyan is already turning away to leave. Peter mentally calls Kalyan heartless, but tries not to show his resentment. Kalyan begins to walk away, taking steps away from his interlocutors. The guy with white hair, turning around, emphasizes that he is leaving not because of Peter's words, but for important reasons. Peter, with a forced smile, assures that he understands everything and holds no grudge. Kalyan walks down the long corridor, and Peter and Philip watch him go. Peter is surprised that even such a cold man as the Grand Duke is capable of such emotions. He notes to himself that the Duke's castle turned out to be much more interesting than he expected. The black-haired boy reflects that returning home promises only endless routine. Philip reminds Peter that it is time to go to his quarters. Peter agrees with a slight smile, accepting the offer. He decides that listening to Philip's lectures is more fun than being bored alone. Peter and Philip are walking down the hallway, and the guy with black hair, with his hands behind his head, is thinking out loud. Kalyan walks quickly down the empty corridor, lost in his thoughts. Kalyan recalls how, after Letitia's death, he tried to find traces of her past life. At the bar, Peter tells Kalyan about an ancient manuscript that fell into his hands. On the pages of the manuscript, Kalyan finds a mention of the Shutton Tower, which piques his interest. Peter watches the events unfold with a mysterious smile, anticipating something unusual. Kalyan wonders if Peter is hiding something or if he truly has nothing to hide. The guy clenches his fist, deciding that he should task Mark with packing Peter's things for the evening. The spacious library is quiet, with sunlight softly illuminating the books and furniture. Letitia sits at the table, her face buried in her hands, lost in her thoughts. Kalyan confidently tells Letitia that he will handle his own affairs. The girl with pink hair remains at the table without raising her head. She is overcome with fatigue and sadness. In the silence of the library, a knock is heard on the massive door. Letitia flinches when she hears her name and looks up from the table. The pink-haired girl slowly stands up, shyly approaching the door to let the guest in. There is a voice behind the door, and someone is about to come inside. Letitia rushes to stop the guest, hastily rising from her seat. In her haste, her shoe slips off her foot, leaving the girl barefoot. Letitia turns around, noticing that she has lost her shoe, and looks embarrassed. Kalyan stands in the doorway, watching the pink-haired girl carefully. Silence reigns in the library. A lonely shoe remains lying on the floor. Letitia, hiding behind a shelf, watches Kalyan with concern and does not understand why she is hiding. The boy with white hair notices the shoe and picks it up, his gaze becoming softer. The girl shifts awkwardly from foot to foot, feeling insecure without one shoe. Letitia is relieved to see Kalyan about to leave, and her tension eases a little. A thoughtful look appears in her eyes, as if she is deciding whether to say or do something. Kalyan comes closer, and the pink-haired girl looks at him in surprise, not expecting his return. She admits that she thought the guy had already left, and Kalyan drops to one knee next to her. The guy calmly says that he still has time, and if necessary, he will just say so. Letitia, smiling, jokes about how confused the vassals will be if Kalyan does not leave in time. Kalyan sits in the hall, his face serious and focused. The guy carefully takes Letitia by the leg, showing concern. The girl is surprised and embarrassed when he bows before her. Kalyan doesn't understand why his wife should endure this inconvenience. Letitia is amazed by his attention and care. He carefully places the shoe on her foot, protecting it from dirt. Kalyan kneels down in front of Letitia, carefully supporting her, and the girl looks at him shyly. The guy freezes surrounded by blue flowers, his gaze filled with tenderness and sadness.